Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 2 Maccabees, the 4th chapter. This Simon now, of whom we spake afore, having been a betrayer of the money and of his country, slandered Onias, as if he had terrified Heliodorus and been the worker of these evils. So he tried to speak, he was speaking ill, saying like Onias is the reason Heliodorus went back, without the money, and he did this and he did that, and so on. Thus was he bold to call him a traitor that had deserved well of the city, and tended his own nation, and was so zealous of the laws, being Onias, that is, being worthy of as it says, he deserved well of the city. He tended to his nation. He treated people well. Simon called him a traitor. But when their hatred went so far that by one of Simon's faction, murders were committed. So them being on bad terms, got to the point where they had groups, factions, right? Some that were Simon's supporters and some that were on Onias' side. And it got to the point where those that were on Simon's side, as it says, committed murders, right? So for his cause, it got so bad that Onias, seeing the danger of this contention, and that Apollonius, as being the governor of Syria and Phoenice, did rage and increase Simon's malice. So he was supporting Simon in this. He went to the king, not to be an accuser of his countrymen, but seeking the good of all, both public and private. That is Onias. He went there because, as it says, for he saw that it was impossible that the state should continue quiet, and Simon leave his folly unless the king did look thereunto. So it has to be escalated, or else it's not gonna cease. It's not gonna stop on its own. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 303 talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. So he basically told Antiochus, look, you make me the high priest, I'll give you all this amount, and that amount. Beside this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise. So he said, look, you give me permission to basically set up a gym, I'll give you an extra 150 talents. And for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians, meaning make them citizens of Antioch. So he was going all the way left, which when the king had granted, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion. So he basically Hellenized, a lot of Israelites. And the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John, the father of Eupolemus, who went ambassador to Rome for amity and aid, he took away. So those royal privileges, Jason ended up taking that away. And putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law. So the laws, the ordinances, the system that was set up according to our law, Jason basically, reverted that and set up new customs that were more in the Greekish ways. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. So he was putting indoctrinating them into the Greek fashions, right? Going to the gym, because usually they would do that naked, partaking in how it was like to live like a Greek. Now such was a height of Greek fashions, an increase of heathenish manners, through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch and no high priest. That the priest, so he said it got so bad, right? It got to the point where The priests had no courage to serve anymore at the altar, but despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifices, hastened to be partakers of the unlawful allowance in the place of exercise. After the game of discus called them forth. So he influenced them so much that the priests neglected. They basically despised doing the ordinances and the sacrifices of the Lord, and instead went after the ways of the gym and the discus, right? Which is like, that sport where you throw the disc, you spin, 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 and throw that disc. That's what they were getting into. Imagine that. Not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all. So they completely, for modern day terms, shitted on the ways, right, of our forefathers, and instead adopted the ways of the Greeks, by reason whereof sore calamity came upon them. So this brought wrath from the Lord upon us. For they had by them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly. So the very people in whose customs that Israel ran after, they became our enemies, and unto whom they desire to be like in all things. For it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the laws of God, but the time following shall declare these things. Right. So basically, as you keep reading, you'll find out just how not of a light thing it is to do wickedly against the laws of God. Now, when the game that was used every faith year, when you look in some of the other translations, they'll have that faith as like 5 or 4, every 4 to 5 years. The game here is like how you have the Olympics now. They had, like, this was their version. Was kept at Tyrus, the king being present, that's Antiochus. This ungracious Jason sent special messengers from Jerusalem, who were Antiochians, to carry 300 drachms of silver to the sacrifice of Hercules. So he sent that much money to go in and go and basically be used for the sacrifice of Hercules, which even the bearers thereof thought fit not to bestow upon the sacrifice, because it was not convenient, but to be reserved for other charges. So even those that were sending the money, they were like, man, it doesn't make sense to use all this money on some damn sacrifice. This money then, in regard of the sender, was appointed to Hercules' sacrifice, but because of the bearers thereof, it was employed to the making of galleys. So they basically, like, they were told that it should be sent there so they could use it for the sacrifice, but they ended up switching it up and using it for something else. Now, when Apollonius, the son of Menestheus, was sent into Egypt for the coronation of King Ptolemaeus, Philometor, Antiochus, understanding him not to be well affected to his affairs. So Antiochus realized that Philometor wasn't basically in agreement, right, or in favor of Antiochus's affairs, provided for his own safety. So he took measures for his safety, because he started to now have fear lest Ptolemy, became a more prominent enemy against him. Whereupon he came to Joppa, and from thence to Jerusalem. So he wanted to make sure that he had those areas on lock, because they would be key areas if Ptolemy was to come against him, that could be used against him. Where he was honorably received of Jason and of the city, and was brought in with torch alight, and with great shoutings, and so afterward went with his host unto Phoenice. 3 years afterward, Jason sent Menelaus, the aforesaid Simon's brother, to that Simon, that damn demon Simon, who went and said that, oh, the treasury got all this money, come and take it. His brother, Menelaus, Jason ends up sending Menelaus to bear the money onto the king, and to put him in mind of certain necessary matters. So basically he sends him, take this money to him, and, remind him of, our agreements on this, that, and the third. But he, being brought to the presence of the king, when he had magnified him for the glorious appearance of his power, so he kissed his ass, got the priesthood to himself, offering more than Jason by 300 talents of silver. So he ended up swaying Antiochus to give him the position of high priest. So he came with the king's mandate, bringing nothing worthy, or bringing nothing worthy the high priesthood, but having the fury of a cruel tyrant and the rage of a savage beast. So he basically came with that permission. Hey, look, the king made me the high priest now. Meanwhile, he had zero qualities of being a high priest. You're just a tyrannical demon. Then Jason, who had undermined his own brother, being undermined by another, was compelled to flee into the country of the Ammonites. So now he had to run for his own life, being that he was tasting of his own medicine. So Menelaus got the principality, but as for the money that he had promised unto the king, he took no good order for it, albeit Sostrates, the ruler of the castle, required it. So after he became a high priest, he didn't pay that money that he said he would give to the king. But Sostrates, which was working for the king, he said, like, you gotta call for that money, man. For unto him appertained the gathering of the customs, or the tribute, wherefore they were both called before the king. So he was getting pressure put on him to where the customs at, where's the tribute, and he's pressuring Menelaus like, yo, you know that you got to bring up this money, right? So both of them are called before the king. Now Menelaus left his brother Lysimachus in his stead in the priesthood, and Sostrates left Cretes, who was governor of the Cyprians. While those things were in doing, they of Tarsus and Malos made insurrection, because they were given to the king's concubine called Antiochus. So Antiochus gave one of his concubines the region of Tarsus and Malos. I believe that's in Asia Minor. They were upset, so they made an insurrection about that. They're like, who the f is this? You know what I'm saying? Then came the king in all haste to appease matters, leaving Andronicus, a man in authority, for his deputy. So he leaves Andronicus in charge, and he goes to go and appease the people. Now Menelaus, supposing that he had gotten a convenient time, stole certain vessels of gold out of the temple, and gave some of them to Andronicus, and some he sold to Tyrus and the cities round about. Purebred demon, which when Onias knew of a surety, he reproved him, and withdrew himself into a sanctuary at Daphne that lieth by Antiochia. So once he heard it, he rebuked openly Menelaus, and then he fled, because he knew that this guy is a demon, he might come for me. Wherefore Menelaus, taking Andronicus apart, because Andronicus was like acting king at this point while Antiochus was out, prayed him to get Onias into his hands, who being persuaded thereunto, and coming to Onias in deceit, gave him his right hand with oaths. So Menelaus basically said, look, you gotta do something about this guy. So Andronicus, with the power that he had, he goes in there and he tries to, deceive Onias. And though he were suspected by him, yet persuaded he him to come forth of the sanctuary. So even though Onias suspected that this guy is lying, he still managed to persuade him and lure him out of the sanctuary, whom forthwith he shut up without regard of justice. So he killed him. For the which cause not only the Jews, but many also of other nations took great indignation, and were much grieved for the unjust murder of the man. So when word got out, people were pissed off. And when the king was come from the places about Cilicia, the Jews that were in the city, and certain of the Greeks that abhorred the fact also, complained, because Onias was slain without cause. So they were like, yo, what's up, man? Why is this guy why did he go and just kill Onias? Because everybody knew about Onias, like how good of a high priest he was and the things that he did for the people. So they were like, yo, you pretty much killed an innocent man. What's up? Therefore Antiochus was heartily sorry, and moved to pity, and wept because of the sober and modest behavior of him that was dead, being Onias. I guess even a clock is right twice a day, right? Then being kindled, broken clock. Then being kindled with anger, forthwith he took away Andronicus his purple, and rent off his clothes, and leading him through the whole city on to that very place, so a nice humiliation ritual, where he had committed impiety against Onias, there slew he the cursed murderer. Thus the Lord rewarded him his punishment as he had deserved. So Andronicus, who murdered Onias, was slain in that place where he murdered Onias. Now when the many sacrileges had been committed in the city, by Lysimachus with the consent of Menelaus, and the fruit thereof was spread abroad. When news got abroad, the multitude gathered together gathered themselves together against Lysimachus, many vessels of gold being already carried away. Because when they were like, yo, this guy's been stealing from the temple and doing what? Yeah, no. So he started having mobs, rising up. Whereupon the common people rising and being filled with rage, Lysimachus armed about 3,000 men and began first to offer violence. So he sent out those men to start, going and killing the people. One Araunus being the leader, a man far gone in years and no less in folly, meaning he was as foolish as he was old. They then, seeing the attempt of Lysimachus, some of them caught stones, some clubs, others taking handfuls of dust. So this was like a mob, right, that came against them, because they were like, "Ain't no way you doing all this wickedness in the temple. Get out of here! Get out of here with that." It says here, handfuls of dust that was next at hand, cast them all together upon Lysimachus, and those that sat upon him. Thus many of them they wounded, and some they struck to the ground, and all of them they forced to flee. And this was the men of Lysimachus. But as for the church robber himself, being Lysimachus, him they killed beside the treasury, and that he was the brother of Menelaus. Of these matters, therefore there was an accusation laid against Menelaus. So they brought an accusation against him, like basically like a lawsuit, just a case. Let's say that they brought a case against him to say, look, this guy has been robbing from the temple. He's been doing this. He's been doing that. He set his brother up to do this, that, and the third. Now, when the king came to Tyrus, 3 men that were sent from the Senate, being the let's say the court of Israel, pleaded the cause before him. So they brought the case. They said, look, Menelaus is guilty on this, that. He's doing this, he's doing that. On behalf of the people, something got to be done about him. But Menelaus, being now convicted, promised Ptolemy, the son of Dorimenes, to give him much money if he would pacify the king toward him. So when Menelaus saw that he was basically going to be guilty of it, and it wasn't going to go his way, he bribed this Ptolemy to speak sweet things into the minds of Antiochus to get Menelaus off the hook. Whereupon Ptolemy, taking the king aside into a certain gallery, as it were to take the air, brought him to be of another mind. So he basically pulls the king aside, like they're gonna go get fresh air, and then convinces him to let Menelaus off. Insomuch that he discharged Menelaus from the accusations, who, notwithstanding, was cause of all the mischief. So this dude was a complete demon, and now he's off scot-free. And those poor men, who were the ones who came with the case, who, if they had told their cause, yea, before the Scythians, should have been judged innocent, them he condemned to death. And this is saying that this was such an unjust and unrighteous decree, that if the Scythians, the stereotype about them was they were brutal and barbarian. But the author is saying here that if these men brought their case before even people as brutal as the Scythians, even they would have judged right and said, no, these men are innocent. This guy Menelaus is guilty. And yet Antiochus condemned them to death. Thus they that followed the matter of this for the city and for the people and for the holy vessels did soon suffer unjust punishment. So the ones that went to bring the case in defense of the city and people ended up being put to death. Wherefore even they of Tyrus, moved with hatred of that wicked deed, caused them to be honorably buried. So they honorably buried these men, because they were like, yo, this some BS. And so through the covetousness of them that were of power, Menelaus remained still in authority, because he used that, right? He said, look, I'm going to give you money, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that. Antiochus, Ptolemy, they were all greedy for money, greedy for gain. So Menelaus used that to his advantage to stay in authority. Increasing in malice and being a great traitor to the citizens. And that brings us to the end of the book of 2nd Maccabees, the 4th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.